Welcome everybody, Joel Silverman here for another one of our great vlogs, podcasts, video reporting here. Today we've got Clint Gerst with us, who is the president of the Bank of Bozeman. I am unbelievably excited for this interview because as I've gotten to know Clint, his story is a crazy one, how he ended up in Bozeman, ended up at the Bank of Bozeman. This man has a knowledge and a history that to me as a business owner is exciting, and it's exciting to see what you're doing with a small local bank that is really reshaping this valley that's the Gallatin Valley, and how you guys have taken such a proactive role in businesses for our clients and other businesses around Bozeman and around this area of Montana. So Clint, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I hope I live up to your expectations.
That shouldn't be hard. Well, Clint, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history? Where'd you grow up?
In Dallas, Texas.
And
so I grew, I was in the same house until I left high school to go to university. So my dad was a former Marine. My mom was an executive secretary. And the neighbors used to say that when my father walked out on the front porch, the grass would stand up at attention and salute. So I have a brother and a sister, and we, that yard, we worked that yard hard. I mean, and I picked cotton, I picked okra, worked the garden. I mean, my dad believed that, work builds character, and so everybody chipped in, and it was a, very much fundamental kind of value family. And then he became an accountant in the energy patch after he left the Corps, and my mother stayed home with the kids.
Excellent. You then went to college at Texas A&M, right?
I did.
And what'd you study there?
Petroleum engineering.
What got you into petroleum engineering?
Well, my dad was working for an oil firm. You're in Texas, and there was an energy crisis going on that happened when I was growing up, and so thought I could, I liked engineering, I liked science, and thought I could help, the U.S. Become energy independent, and it paid well, and so went into engineering and got a great job with Shell Oil Company.
Now, Shell Oil is a huge multinational worldwide conglomerate, right? You're working for the U.S. division.
Correct.
What is that like working for such a huge company?
Well, it's interesting. They have tremendous resources. So one of the things that attracted me to Shell is that they can do some of the sexiest projects. I mean, they could do the CO2 flooding. They have significant investment budgets. So for an engineer to work for a large company like that, you really get exposed to some real talent, and you get to work on some exciting projects.
Yeah. So with that, though, you wanted to change. You were kind of evolving while you were at Shell, right?
Right, because when I was there, you had the oil price downturn, and so some of these projects were being curtailed. And Shell, with deep pockets, was buying companies. They were investing assets and all that. And so I thought, it'd be great to get on the business side of these transactions. But my boss said, you need to have an MBA to do that. Everybody over there has an MBA. And so I started thinking about that, and he said, you should go to Harvard. And I go, well, I never lived outside of Texas. I don't know if I could get to Harvard. I mean, I was thinking about maybe the University of Texas or Rice or something, or maybe going to A&M's business school. And he said, no, you should definitely apply to Harvard, and I'll write you a recommendation. And I know that Joe Clegg, who was one of the really outstanding talents of the industry, I had a chance to work on a project with him, and he said he'll write you a recommendation too. And then I had the head of the petroleum engineering department at Texas A&M, Dr. Von Gonten, write me a recommendation, and that on the strength of those, I got in.
Wow. Now, you had an interesting twist in the meantime, though. Before you applied, right, you had a little personal life thing happening.
Yes, I was falling in love, and so this was going on. I'm falling in love and thinking about this, and so I had to when I proposed to her in Big Bend National Park, and I picked a spot that's called the Window, which you got to hike down in the Chesis Mountains, and the sun at that time of year will set between the mountain ranges, and it's a spectacular sight. You got to go there at the right time. But I had this all planned. I'm an engineer, so I had figured out exactly where I needed to be at what time, right? Got there on time. We were there, and I was talking to her and said, well, I was thinking about maybe making a change and going to business school, and I, thinking about applying to Harvard and some others, and so that would mean moving. Would you be interested in maybe being with me during that phase of life. And she said, "Yeah, I could if you get into Harvard, I could see quitting the job and moving." And then I proposed to her, and she said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes, I am." So, but basically the decision was, if she said yes, we'd live the rest of our lives together. And if she said no, I would leave her there in the mountains, and she would have a very difficult time getting back, because it was Big Bend. If you've been there, I mean, it's pretty remote.
Yeah.
So to get out of that spot, it would have been hard.
As an engineer, you planned it well.
That's right. I was going to leave her. She said no. I was going to trek out of there and leave. That was it. But she said yes, so we left together.
So now you moved to Massachusetts. You go to Harvard. How was that?
That was an amazing experience for me, because as an engineer, most of the work is analytical, and there's not much class discussion, right? It's lecture, and you study the material, you learn how to do the problems, and you take the tests, right? It's not, people's opinions don't matter as much in engineering. It's really are you right or are you wrong? Does the structure stand or does it fail? And so it's a little bit more black and white. At business school at Harvard, it is 50% of your grade is class participation. And there's people from all over the world there. And some, at A&M, I was really one of the brighter guy, because I was on full scholarship. I was one of the top of my class kind of thing. Harvard, I'm kind of in the middle, maybe the bottom half. It's like, okay, I've gone from being a star to being just one of the many stars. And people are hardworking and they're driven, and so it was a very different environment. And because it's so much dependent on class participation, I'd never really talked in class before. I never had to present oral arguments, because that didn't matter how well you argued something. It was all whether you were right or not.
Yeah.
But in the business world, how you argue things can sometimes make a difference between right and wrong. You could be wrong, but if you argue well, you get your point. So it's a different. And the talent of the professors is amazing. I had good professors at A&M, and in engineering, they're known for engineering, but you're dealing with, all the professors there are like, celebrities, and they're so talented, and they work, they really push you in the class, and you have, CEOs visit the class. I mean, we had Buffett there, we had Diamond there, we had Sandy Weil, we had the CEO of IBM at the time. And in that class, when the CEO of IBM is there, we were asked, well, if you were the CEO, we had a case on IBM and what the CEO should do. And you have all the case facts and all that. And the CEO himself is sitting right there. And I get called on to pretend to be him, and he is there. And so you just have to learn how to deal with that. I had to get up in front of the class and make my arguments, tell them my strategy, and then take questions where they try to poke holes in your arguments from very talented co-students, So and I'm looking at the CEO as he's smiling or thinking, making him look like shit or whatever, And it was, it's fun. It's a different experience. I got a lot out of it.
Yeah,
made a lot of friends too.
Did the CEO of IBM ask you any good questions?
He listened. He listened. He did not punish me. Then we heard, what he, I think it was Fred Akers at the time. He went through kind of his rationale, his reasoning, and he said that I did a good job. I was fairly thoughtful, and I thought I handled the crowd pretty well. Because you have to, right?
Yeah.
You got bright people trying to tear you apart.
So now, did you get married while you're at your MBA?
No, I got married before. So
okay.
Proposed, I got accepted, and then you get accepted 6 months before I actually got there. So I got accepted in March. I think I got married in April and started the school that fall.
And
so it was pretty fast.
You graduate. What's the next step in life?
So then the world really opens up to you. You get interview, and I was thinking about I could go back to Shell, and a lot of people talk to banks, talk to consulting firms. I really looked at a lot of different things, but Citibank intrigued me because of their global network and because the kind of deals they're doing, and I thought, well, if in banking, you probably need to go to New York at some point. So I got an offer in New York City and took it.
And how was that? What was that
That
like?
was a wild experience, but it's very different than Shell. Shell is much more controlled, much more analytical. The hallways in Shell were pretty quiet. People are in their offices working. You have conferences, you have meetings, and then you go back to your office and work, right?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of buzz. City is loud and boisterous, and people are, the hours are long, papers are flying. I mean, it's a different kind of work environment. Wall Street is its own kind of culture, and and the trading floor is just a completely different animal than even the banking side. So, you do have some quiet, but it's not like the quiet you have in Shell. I mean, you can concentrate, you can have phone calls, but you have to close your door.
Yeah.
Because there's people, people are watching the markets, people are just attuned to what's going on, and it's like, have you seen this? Or what's, somebody will start yelling out of their office and say, what's going on? And I mean, it's, do you see what happened to the pound? I mean, it's very different than a Shell environment.
Coming out of engineering program, I could definitely see where that would be a little shell shock.
And it was fun, and we did a lot of interesting deals at work, and so I kind of moved up through the ranks there in New York, and it was like, well, I'd like to try to run an office. And so they came to me and said, well, what do you think of running the office in Calgary, Alberta? And I said, well, I thought the bank was thinking about closing that office. They said, we are. We think it needs new leadership. And the guy there is retiring. So this is the deal. You go there, and if you do well, we'll promote you to managing director and give you another great assignment. And if you can't turn around, we'll fire you and close the office. Are you interested? And I'm kind of a risk taker, right? And so it's like, well, I talked with my wife and said, this is the deal. It's kind of, this office is kind of a mediocre performer. They're thinking, do they really need an office there in Calgary? But if I can go there and turn it around, then it'll be great for us. And I'll get the MD promotion is the big promotion in banking, at least in the Wall Street. You're a managing director. We call it the mad dog. It's kind of, and so that gets you a whole different level of compensation. It's a whole different level of responsibility, and it's coveted, right? That's the carrot. And if I could go and turn this office around, then they'll give it to me, right? And so I took the shot.
So I got to ask, before we keep down that rabbit trail, you said you're a risk taker, and I have yet to meet an engineer that's a risk taker. How did that happen for you?
Well, I think you take risks that are calculated, right? You don't take reckless risks, because those usually end up badly, right? So
how did you
in fact, it's one of the things that happened to this bank in the financial crisis. They were reckless, and they overwhelmed the bank, and they nearly bankrupted the bank, and had to raise a lot of equity. So I think with a risk like that, it's like, well, what's the real downside? Okay, I run an office, but I could get another job, right? I had all this experience. I could try to turn this around. So the downside, really, in reality, yes, you get fired, maybe, although they might have been just, playing me a bit. But, even if that happened, I could find another job.
Yeah.
Right? The downside wasn't that terrible, and I'd had that experience.
Yeah.
Versus the upside was big. So I think you got to look at downside risk, upside risk. Who really is? How's it really going to play out? What's the real consequences? And then, take a thoughtful bet. And banking is risk taking, right? We take risks on our clients every day, but it needs to be a thoughtful risk, and we use how they historically have behaved, their character, the quality of the asset, all these things to really mitigate the downside. And I think you can, if you constantly can skew toward the upside and minimize that downside, most of these risks pay off.
There we go. That's what I was really looking for, because that really lets everybody understand your psyche, right, in the business world. And too many times when I see people taking risk in business, I don't see them contemplating the downside risk, or all they contemplate is the downside risk and not the upside. And they don't think, okay, I can minimize my downside, but what is truly the upside risk or the upside benefit? Because I think psychologically we have this tendency to run from fear more than we do move towards success or opportunity.
Right. No, I think instinctively a lot. Well, some people are different, right? But instinctively, people like in this market, right, it's down 25%, right? So some people are going, I'm out. I'm going to sell all my equities. This is terrible. I lost 25% from the high, but they're not thinking long term, where they're thinking, well, if you don't need the money immediately, maybe we would like people to put more money in the bank. And there should be a nest egg, right? You should have a good chunk of money in an FDIC insured deposit because that gives you comfort. But so you recognize, okay, I've set aside this money in a safe bank that's insured, and that I can count on no matter what. So you take that money off the table, but you don't want to miss the opportunity that this is a short-lived thing and it'll bounce back. And America has a great long-term future. And that's what's going to be reflected in the markets eventually. And eventually the markets will reflect the reality. And there's going to be short-term blips along the way. And there's going to be, that we could enter a recession. It could be down for 2 years or whatever. But the long-term outlook for Bozeman, for Montana, for the country is good. It's really good.
Yeah.
And especially if you see the talent we produce, you can just spend some time with the MSU students to realize this country has a bright future. Right?
Yeah.
There's some real talent in this country that gives me a lot of encouragement that the future's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're now a mad dog.
Yeah,
right?
so I did turn Calgary around. Now the thing is, first of all, people kind of already there knew that life was that their jobs were kind of at risk. So as a new person, I was a little worried about taking over. I'm from New York. Am I going to get a lot of resistance? There, no. I was greeted with open arms and saying, hey, we're really excited about working with you. How do we turn this thing around? I mean, I had a lot of support. So it was from a leadership challenge, it was a pretty good first assignment because I didn't have to deal with too much dysfunction. Everybody was like, they wanted me to succeed to help them succeed because I knew that we could all lose our jobs.
Yeah.
So it's highly motivating. And we hit the market at a good time, and there were a lot of things we could do that they hadn't thought of. And so where we really made our money was helping companies access the U.S. bond market. And so we did the traditional banking stuff, but the big breakthrough that I brought to them is that they didn't know the U.S. capital markets like I did, and they didn't know the people in New York like I did. And I could put companies in touch with our bond desk, which they didn't have before, and we could access U.S. capital markets. And the Canadians issued, at one point, our office was doing half the entire country's U.S. bond business was being done by our office. I mean, so it was a knock it out of the park kind of experience for me and for the office. And, I could get people paid. I could get certain things happened. There was a woman in the office. It was one of my best moments was there was this woman in the office that had never received a bonus ever. Because Citibank has kind of a tiered thing where some people are bonus eligible, others aren't at all. I mean, they can get raises, but they don't get bonused. But she was such a loyal person, had done such a great job, and and I had enough because of the success. I could get things to happen, and I said, you know what, I think she should get paid a bonus, and this is what I think it should be. And there was the bank, the president of the bank in Canada at the time was going, well, it could cause some disruption. Because other people will be jealous or whatever. Because why? I said, well, she's done a good job, and I could argue for her. And so he gave me the allocation. And the day I told her she had a bonus was sweet. I mean, she just bawled, and felt like she was recognized. They created an atmosphere that, hey, this guy's really looking out for all of us, not just trying to feather his cap. I knew I was going for the mad dog, though. So I did have my own personal goals in all this, but I was able to help a lot of people out. I was able to help one guy get on, because he had dreamed of going to New York and working on a trading desk. I said, I can make this happen.
Yeah.
So I could place people in the office in some of these great jobs because of that success. So that was great.
Excellent. What was the next jumping point then?
That was very different because then I got the mad dog, and Enron had happened in Houston, and so all these other companies were in trouble. And my reception in Houston was very different. It was like, who's this? And Texas is my home state, right? This is where I grew up. I said, I'm going back home in a way, going to Houston, running a group. And it was like, who is this Harvard asshole to come down here and take over things? And he's great, right? He's got all this great history in Canada, but he's never had to deal with tough credit issues, right? He's never had a restructuring. All his clients are making money. I mean, they are all accessing the bond market. It was all good times. We're faced with all this bankruptcy, potential bankruptcy and all this. This guy knows nothing about bankruptcy. This guy knows nothing about, hard credit decisions and all that. And, who the hell is he to run us? And does he blame us for these problems? These really aren't our problem. There was a lot of, the group was tired because of all these challenges. It wasn't about growing the place. It was more about trying to minimize the loss to the bank. And all these companies were facing bankruptcy potentially. Citibank was blamed for doing business with Enron. It was, there was testimony on Capitol Hill where Citi was testifying, and I was the guy who had never made a mistake in his life, and was the fair-haired boy and was going to come down and tell them how to right the ship. Bullshit, So the reception was cold as hell. It was terrible.
Yeah.
I wasn't greeted as a hero. So I had to kind of earn my way there in my own home state. It's like, this should be easier than this. But yes, we were able to turn things around and start making money, and they recognized my value eventually. But it took a lot of work.
How did you change the mindset there? Because that negativity, that kind of negative mindset, can be a pretty hard thing to break.
It was, and for some, I never did. For some, they decided they were going to hate my guts, and they weren't. I wasn't going to change their mind. But others, I could. And so, initially, it's like, okay, I can't really change people's attitude toward me, but we've got a job to do. The truth was, I didn't know credit. I knew how to work with customers. I learned how to negotiate. I was comfortable in having difficult discussions, but I needed to learn a lot from them too, right? Because I hadn't dealt with bankruptcy before. And so I got the mad dog. The other thing, and part of the reason of taking this assignment in Houston was to get my senior credit initial. That's the other big, it allows you to sign off on some billion-dollar credits as a credit officer if you're an SCO versus a credit. They had multiple levels of credit officer. But to become a senior credit officer, the city makes a big deal out of it. They have this kind of crystal pyramid that you get once you become a senior credit officer, and you sit that on your desk. It's like the pyramid. You've got the power. And that's in my office in here, And so it's like, okay, so I'm going for the pyramid now. And it was really hard work, long hours, a lot of unpleasantness, right? Because dealing with the lawyers and all this is hard. But I think what you do is you focus on treating people well, and you start making some friends that way, and treating people with respect, and most of them will come around. Not everybody, and you can't have everybody like you, but I think you focus on doing the right thing, people are burned out, so people are tired, people are, the office is an unhappy place. And you start trying to just say, okay, let's start having some small victories. Just trying to let's start putting some wins on the board together and solving problems. One by one, chipping away at some of these issues, making some money for the bank, protecting the institution, and moving on. And then not forgetting the personal side. So, for example, there was, analysts and associates at the mega banks are usually treated pretty badly. And there was this one guy who, they were there. We were there till midnight to 2 a.m. a lot of nights, right, and weekends. This is workout kind of work. And people they smell bad, and they're tired, and they're irritable, right? This is the environment. But you're working through all this stuff. You're running all these scenarios. And there was this analyst that had there was this girl he was trying to get a date with, and he got her to accept a date on that Saturday night. It was Saturday. And he had landed the date, but it would mean, he needed to be gone by about 7 o'clock. And his boss told him no, that he had to stay there. And so he came to me and said, listen, I haven't had a date in like over a month, and I've been trying to take this guy out, and I need to have at least I got it just for my own sanity. And he said, I'll come back. I will take her out. We'll go to the concert, and I will come back and I will finish this work that you need done, because I know you need it, Sunday, because you got to get ready you're going to be flying out. Because we had a presentation on Monday. I had to have the books, had to be gone, fly out, and do the presentation. And so it had to get done. And he said, I will come back to the office and get it done. I'll come back at 4 a.m., and get it done so it's ready for you. And so I told his boss that I approved him leaving, and she said, well, it's on you if the presentation's screwed up. And I think this is a big mistake, and you're just a sucker. You're just, this is why you shouldn't be leading this team, because you're, you're just you just don't have you're just not driven like the rest of us or whatever. And I said, well, it'll work out. I promise you it's going to work out. And of course it did. He came back. But the thing is, the fact that I did that for him,
yeah,
I started to get a reputation in my analyst pool that they're just not slaves, that I actually care about them as human beings, and that I will make accommodations, and they'll make sure things are done. And I told him my philosophy, my business law is get the job done. All right, you can have all kinds of personal issues, whatever. What I expect is you get the job done, or you have someone cover for you, or whatever. Right? What I care about is results. If you have to be gone or whatever, then that's okay. We're going to work out. You are a person, but you have a job. But you get your job done. I'll treat you with respect. Even if you're a lowly analyst that's not even supposed to talk to a managing director. You're not even supposed to speak to me. You're supposed to go through the chain. But since you did, I'll take. And so that helped me start to make some friends, and doing things like that. And we started having some successes. But man, it was tough, and it wasn't a happy place to be in. So yeah, I'm getting paid, but it's like, this is a miserable place to work. But things turned around. It took a while, but eventually things came around, and then after we did the restructuring, I got a great, got through that, got my pyramid, and had a chance to work with some international companies and to have a little bit more fun job, and so that was good.
Nice. Well, I love one part in there you talk about small victories.
Yeah.
That I think too oftentimes we in the business world get so enamored with the big victories, we forget the little steps on the way there to celebrate the little triumphs in life, whether it's your personal life or in business, because we're looking for something that's far out, that's a big shot, rather than going, wait a second, you don't get the big shot unless you get all the little shots, little steps in between.
Right. No, they're important, and they matter to people.
Absolutely, especially as managers, it matters.
Yeah.
Because it matters more so to the people underneath you as a manager than it does to you. Because the manager's looking at the big goal, and we forget about the little stuff. Yeah. But that can mean a lot to somebody like an analyst. Yeah. So that's fantastic. So you go from there, and then now what's our next step?
My second in command, so I took a different position, stayed in Houston. The kids were in high school, so I didn't want to move anywhere else. So we stayed in Houston, took over this international portfolio, which was a lot of fun. And my second in command was really, he wasn't rolling grenades in my office, but he was ready to take the job. He is talented and was skilled, and there's timing, right? So I needed to move. I needed to give him that opportunity because he was ready for it. And so his question was, well, what to do next within city. And so I was looking at things and thinking about going back to New York. But my wife loves the mountains, and she loved our time in Calgary and loved this part of the country. And so it's like, well, we could go back to New York, but I really don't want to live in New York. And I was at that time with City for 24 years and done well. And, the New York job and some of the jobs I was looking at in the bank I'd already kind of reached a level where I'd kind of plateaued. I mean, I wasn't going to become part of Mike Corbat's inner circle. This wasn't going to happen. And so it was like, well, I could finish my career like this, or I could do something different, right? I could spend another, 7-8 years at the bank kind of at this level, which was good. I mean, it was a decent level, but, do I want to go to New York, and does it make sense? And so, my wife said, well, you've always, you have this kind of bucket list of things you want to do, right? And so one of mine was run a small bank in the mountains. Kind of, you have these things in a beautiful location with the mountains where you can ski. And she said, why don't you look into that? And I had done some panel work with some community bank presidents in Houston, where they'd have 3 of the mega banks there, and I'd be the guy from Citi, and the guy from JP Morgan would be there, and the guy from B of A, and then they'd have like 3 community bank presidents on the panel, and then they'd have us debate about things and talk about things, at the University of Houston. And so I got to know some of those guys, and I said, well, I'm thinking about, could I do what you do? I mean, what's it like running a bank?
Yeah.
And they said, it's different, but you've run an organization, so they said, you could do it. You'll need to know the regulatory stuff. I mean, because I had, I had regulators come in to assess my books, but I wasn't running the bank. I was running a division, and it was largely credit that they were looking at, not like whether we were in compliance on lending and all that stuff. I mean, that was done at a different level. And so, they said, you got to get up on this regulatory compliance and stuff. But I said, well, I could study up on that. Yeah, read these things, and so I started, thinking, okay, where would I want to be? And I didn't want to just take a community bank in Houston because I had the dream of in the mountains and all that. So, so my wife and I started listing some cities and towns that we think would be, lovely to live in, right? And so we came up with a group of, I don't know, about 20, 25 towns in the U.S. that we thought would be amazing to live in. And then in that list, we said, okay, who's looking for a bank president in these towns? Well, there were 3. It's like, okay, so I'll throw my name in the hat in these 3 jobs in the U.S. And I said, well, this is a very focused job search. I mean, there's 3 opportunities in the whole country. This is, they say you need some focus, but this is a laser, I don't know if this is going to pan out, but then Bank of Bozeman came through.
Wow.
So here we are.
And what made you pick Bozeman as one of your potential locations for your
It has a lot of the elements we were looking for. So you can ski, you can hike, you can fish. The university being here was important because we think it adds a very intellectual aspect to a town. So we wanted a major university in the town as well. We didn't just want a tourist town, even though it had all these things, because when you add all these outdoor elements, a lot of times these are tourist towns. So we said, no, we want a town that has real business, right? And so we want a real business in there. We want a good airport because we have family. She has family in California. I have family in Texas. We have family in Chicago. So we want a good airport. So we had all these lists of things, all these outdoor activities, culture, restaurants, a symphony, So we had all this list of things, and Bozeman, met the criteria. So, I think this is a wonderful place to live.
Had you and your wife been to Bozeman before?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
That's
the thing. It was just on the list, but we had seen, you got pictures, so you could do this. And I had been to Montana before. Because when I worked for Shell has some properties on the anticline out by Baker. And so I had spent some time in eastern Montana, which is not as beautiful as Bozeman. But I had spent some time in Montana, but not Bozeman. And her father had looked at being a professor at MSU at one point. He thought highly of Montana State. He ended up at the University of Denver, which is a good school. He was a professor of chemistry. But he had high regard for MSU, and she remembered that, and we liked the kind of the whole, what we learned of the culture here, and so it's like, But when I came up the interview, so the process was first it was a phone interview, a couple phone interviews with a couple directors, then it expanded with kind of the more of the board, and then they came me up here for the full board, and then eventually I had to meet some of the top shareholders. When I met the full board, they wanted to meet her too, because this is kind of a public position. I mean, they didn't really interview her, but they spent some time with my wife. We went to the Museum of the Rockies. They said, "Oh, we're going to show you the museum," and so we were there, and they had some time with Joanne, because they're really thinking, the spouse plays an important role too, and so they got to know her, and we got to see Bozeman. And what's funny is that I thought the interviews went well, but you never know, right? There were generally what happens in the community banking space is not someone like from a mega bank coming to run a small bank. Generally, it's a community bank president's trying to move up. So it's, bank president out in, a small bank in the plains that wants to get in the mountains. So there were other bank presidents really as part of the interview group. I don't know all of them, but who they had, but they had mostly other bank presidents that were just trying to trade up, right, and come here to Bozeman. And so I told her, I said, listen, I'm a kind of different than some of these other candidates. I don't know if I'm going to get the job. But my wife fell so much in love with she said, of course, we were out here at a gorgeous day. I mean, you had the snow-capped mountains, it was just beautiful day. It was in the 60s. And she said, we should, we have a couple extra days. We should stay here and we should look at houses. I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to get this job. She goes, well, we should buy a house here anyway, just as a vacation home, So we actually started looking for houses, and I actually closed on a house here before I had the offer in writing. I mean, I had some signals, and it was like, okay, they had verbally extended the offer, but I don't have the paper.
Yeah.
And we were going to close. And I said, are you sure? Yes. Regardless of what happens, I want to live here. I want to spend time here, So she was very much in favor of moving here. And that's important.
Yeah.
And our son loved it too. And he said, well, he was going to school in New York. He said, well, I can transfer to MSU. I mean, because his school in New York, he was at RPI, which is like 80% men, 20% women. He was impressed with there's more 50-50 here, and he liked the atmosphere. And so he thought he could probably ski more and have more fun, which he did. He still graduated though, but his grades did suffer a bit from enjoying life.
Yeah.
But yeah, he transferred here and graduated from MSU last year.
Excellent. And now, do you have any other children?
I do. So our daughter, who is engaged,
Yeah.
And the wedding is scheduled for May 30th, as long as we don't have to cancel it because people can't get together. But assuming nothing happens with this coronavirus, it's for May 30th in California, because that's where his family's from. My wife's family's in California, and so the Texas side, my side, has to travel, but that's all right. It's the fewer people traveling, and they're friends in Chicago. They live in Chicago now.
Oh, excellent.
So she has a great job working for Blackstone.
Okay. And where'd she go to college?
She went to the University of Denver.
Ah, excellent. Okay.
Where her grandfather was a professor.
Oh, neat.
So, it was neat.
So this is about 2015, right, that you moved to Bozeman?
Correct.
Bozeman is exploding at that point again. Everybody in Montana knows 2008 hit Bozeman, Missoula, Kalispell. It hit the fast-growing cities pretty hard.
Right.
And Bank of Bozeman, it extended itself, as I understand it, pretty far out over its handlebars in that time period, as did a lot of banks.
Right.
But you're coming in a pretty big transition period for the bank, right?
Right. I mean, my predecessor, Phil Bratton, did a great job cleaning up the bank's balance sheet. So when the bank got in trouble, I mean, it really took unnecessary risks. And so fortunately, we have a small group of local investors, less than 200 people are investors in the bank. And a few of them said, you know what, we believe in the bank. We were not too big to fail at that time. We believe in it. We want to put more money in, but we want to make some changes. And they made some significant changes to the board and to the management and brought in Phil Bratton, who his team really cleaned up the balance sheet. So they spent those years, 2008 to 2012, 2013, really cleaning things up, getting the bank on a stable footing, raising the additional money from the investor group, which, Bozeman has deep pockets, as you know, and these people had the money, but they just wanted to make sure the bank was headed the right direction. So they recapitalized the bank, and he really handed me a clean balance sheet. He was ready for retirement, turned 70, and said, listen, I want to retire, and what my mission was then, okay, I was handed then a bank in good shape. Can we grow it? Can we continue to serve the community? The wind, it was clear at that point that the wind was at our back, and the board was looking for someone to build the institution, grow the institution. And so that's what I was brought here to do, and that's what I've been doing.
And what has separated Bank of Bozeman from the other banks in Bozeman?
Well, we're really the local independent community bank, and we lend out over 95 cents of our deposits into this community. And so when you're a client of the Bank of Bozeman, your money's not going to finance a plant in China. It's going to work for you in this community. And so, a checking account is pretty similar to a checking account. I mean, it's not like our products are that different. We've invested a lot in technology so we can keep up with the mobile deposit and the online account opening and all that stuff that the bigger banks offer. But what really distinguishes us is our local character and the kind of service we provide. I mean, it's much more personal. We know most of our customers by name when they walk in the door, and even the ones that we deal with online, we get to know. And we make credit decisions. You know, we have a lot more flexibility. You know, we don't have criteria from some home office somewhere that says, oh, if their credit score is below X, you can't do business with them. We can look at the whole package and really see the person that's in front of us and make decisions based on that, not just based on numbers on the page.
And we're facing kind of an uncertain time in the credit markets right now, right? We're seeing a lot of people are pulling money out of the stock market, putting it into the bonds. We've watched the stock market lose 25% in the last 2 weeks. What do you think businesses should be doing now to prepare themselves in case there is an economic downturn or a slowdown due to the current coronavirus situation?
Well, I think they need to think about what happens if we have fewer airline flights, if we have fewer community gatherings, you know, as the government tries to figure out their response. You know, how is it going to impact their business potentially? I think it's always good to have excess liquidity and lines of credit. And we have clients coming in saying, hey, I just, for insurance purposes, want to have a little more liquidity. And we're excited to provide that. I mean, the bank thinks about these things way in advance of we're actually in the situation. And we're thinking about who could we lend more money to, how could we help. And so we want to help businesses get through this. They may have some short-term shortfalls, you know, if we need to go interest only on some things or have a grace period. I mean, this is something where we can be different than if you went to Quicken Loans, because Quicken Loans isn't going to cut you a deal, or Quicken Loans doesn't care, right? These other firms can say, well, you have a payment schedule, we're going to put you in default, we're going to start the process. That's not how we are. I mean, we think about, oh, this is something that's completely not your fault. It's not like you made a bad business decision. If your occupancy levels are down because the event got canceled, you know, that is not a reflection on your management style, right? And the long-term future of your business is good. So we're interested in helping you through it, right? We don't want to put you in a bind or we try to get you to where you make the pain worse or you have to lay off people or all that. We want you to make good, sound business decisions for the long term, and we're here to help you in the short term. And we have the liquidity to do it because, you know, we think about these kind of, you know, did we envision this would happen exactly like it is? Of course not. But we think about recessions. We think about liquidity crisis. We think, okay, what should we do in the good times to prepare for the bad times? So our CFO and myself, we talked about, okay, times were good. Everything is rosy. This is the time to build liquidity for the bank. So we doubled the liquidity of the bank during that period because it was easy to do. It was cheap. And now we have it. You know, if I was going to ask for this stuff right now, well, it'd be harder. But I already, you know, I did it. So we try to think about this advance just in case so we could better serve our customers. So.
And from our side, from a business standpoint, should we be looking for lines of credit? Should we be socking money away? What is some of the advice as a banker that you'd be looking to give, whether it's somebody as a startup or somebody who's already in existence, to make sure that they're going to have?
I think it's always
safety?
good to have liquidity. We love deposits because, like I said, we lend 95 cents or more out to the community. So we try not to fund ourselves with loans. A lot of banks fund themselves with commercial paper or other borrowings from other institutions. We like to fund ourselves with deposits. It's cheaper, for one, and it establishes a relationship. So we think your safe money should be with us. You know, we're FDIC insured. Bring it to us. We'll put it to good use in the community. And then if you're running a business, generally what we've encouraged the businesses to do is kind of what we've done, right? In good times, get this liquidity. So our best clients already have the lines in place for a downturn. But for those that are caught short, come talk to us, you know, say, hey, I'm a little worried about this, or I should have thought about this, or I should have come to you earlier. But just come to us, you know, come talk to us. We'll help you through it.
Yeah.
A lot of startups generally would like to see them funded with equity, you know, have their accounts here, but then a lot of startups shouldn't be funded with debt. It's not a good business practice because it puts the startup at risk. Yeah. You know, give yourself plenty of capital to work through challenges because, you know, things can happen, right, in a startup phase. But yeah, talk to us. Bring in your tax returns, bring in your info. We're happy to have conversations with you. We got partnerships around the whole community that offer all kinds of services. So if you're trying to do a business plan, you're trying to work through an issue, Prospera is one of the big partners we work with that are great about giving advice, having classes, helping people through stuff. So
yeah,
and
Prospera works with SCORE, and
all
the
these
chamber has a lot of great info, and I
They
know you're a
do.
big member of the
Oh,
chamber
yeah.
too. So
the chamber's
Yeah.
good. The Montana Manufacturing Extension Center, for those who are in that space. We partner with MSU on a bunch of stuff, and I'm on their Community Banking Advisory Board. I'm on the board for the Montana Independent Bankers Association. So we're plugged into the community and into the leadership of the state, into the banking centers of the state. I mean, we're a small bank, but we punch way over our weight. And we're an important linchpin to this community because we're just focused on this community, right? So
Yeah.
other banks are having to look at things more broadly. We're thinking Gallatin Valley, Park County, these counties around here. This is really our home, and this is where our focus is. So
Yeah.
we pride ourselves in perhaps knowing our community a little bit better than our competition.
Yeah.
And making better decisions because of it.
Absolutely. Well, and I know you were talking about liquidity, and I know for so many of our business clients, I'm always stressing, make sure you have a line of credit.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
It is just such an easy piece to go work with your local banker to get that line of credit, whether you use it or not. It's the ability to have that cheap access to money to save your butt
when you need it.
if the
'Cause
unexpected happens.
Stuff happens.
Yes, 100%.
It's going to happen.
Well,
so have yourself the peace of mind.
we look at what just happened last night. Last night alone, the NBA canceled the season. The NCAA cancels. They don't cancel the games, but they will
can't
only let
attend.
families attend the games.
I know.
Right? All of a sudden, these are huge changing events to the economy.
Right.
The president canceled all travel to and from most of Europe, right, last night. So these things are not anybody can expect or plan for.
Right. But you can plan for a problem. You just don't know what it's going to be.
Exactly.
But yeah, and so for businesses that are impacted by that, come see us. It's not your fault, and it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
And we're going to have the planes back in the air, and we're going to have the hotels back in business, and we're going to have the restaurants, and people are going to get together again in groups. But for now, we're going to have to. This social distancing that's happening creates economic dislocation. I mean, it has an economic effect, and we'll have to deal with it. But it's not going to last forever. And we have to look at this as, and especially with the equity markets and investments and in banking, we need to take a long-term view and be prepared for short-term pain if and when it arises in whatever form it arises in.
Absolutely. Now, Montana, we're always seem to be about 6 months behind on a lag if there are any major economic impacts out there. And I'm just curious, have you seen any fractures out there, anything that, because I haven't.
No, not here. Not here at all. I mean, obviously it's happening globally in some places. And of course, people who do business with China and Japan or northern Italy are seeing it immediately. I do think we're going to lag it. I don't think we're immune. We shouldn't start thinking, oh, we're immune because we live in this beautiful part of the country. We're not. We have a bunch of students that are going to go on spring break next week. And invariably, we should expect some to come back potentially infected, right? To think that it's impossible is ridiculous.
Yes.
Right? And so we need to be prepared for that. And what would give us a lot of comfort is if they could develop a test that's as easy as some of the other tests you take where it's like you immediately get a reading, do I have it or not, plus or minus. And that would give people a lot of comfort. But, we're prepared for whatever may come. But what's causing this is not so many people are getting sick. It's because the symptoms are pretty mild and people can still work and do their thing for most people. It's the trying to prevent it from spreading is what's causing the problem. And so if we're going to do that as a policy matter, then, it is going to disrupt banking, but we're prepared. We can run the bank out of our drive-up if we have to. I just want to make sure the people I put inside are free and clear of the virus. And then, of course, they're speaking over microphones. You got the glass, and you're passing things through pneumatic tubes. We can do it. if we have to. And of course, you got the online systems. I mean, we're certainly much better prepared to do online banking than we were, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right?
Man.
You can do a lot. So we can socially distance and still function if we have to. And so we're prepared to do it, if it comes to that. Hopefully it won't. But I think you can't just hope that something doesn't happen. You need to be prepared for certain downturns. And I think, the school is thinking about, okay, what do you do when all these kids come back? And I know there's going to be a lot of online courses being taught.
What are some other things that a business should be prepared for, or that they can do to be prepared for some difficult economic times?
Well, I always say a good bookkeeper is worth their weight in gold, right? I mean, at least have a handle on your numbers. Know what your weaknesses are financially. Know what your strengths are. Think about what could impact your customers, right? And what's going to impact your business. And you don't want to miss opportunities, so you want to be prepared to take advantage of opportunities when they come about. And you don't want to have your business dealing with a problem, and so that you can't you miss the opportunity. So you want to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they arise, and you want to be able to manage through the things. So if that means liquidity, if that means being a little more careful about collecting from your clients and all that kind of stuff, do the necessary things to weather the downturn, but don't batten down the hatches to the point you miss opportunities.
Yes. Well, I know a big one I keep pushing on my clients right now is shrink your accounts receivable and expand your accounts payable. Try and lengthen that out if you can. With some of your
Which helps your
resources.
Working capital.
Yep. Keeps liquidity in your company. But I watch too often people do it the opposite. They're getting pushed, especially our clients that are in the oil field right now, they're getting pushed to longer term on their accounts receivable because the oil companies want to hold cash themselves. So they're out 120 days, and yet they're expected to pay 30 days.
Right.
And I'm saying your company can't last that way very long. You got to shorten that accounts receivable and try and lengthen out your accounts payable.
Right. And you want to be in a position, hopefully, if you have the lines of credit with a bank, where if someone's going to offer you, if they want to get paid early, if they offer you a big discount, you want to be able to take advantage of that, because that could be worth a lot to your long-term viability and the value of your company. So if you're being offered big discounts to pay early, if you have a good bank behind you, you can actually take advantage of those discounts. It's good for your business. It's good for everybody. You borrow from the bank cheaper. You're getting a much better return on your investment with those discounts. And so you want to be able to take advantage of that. And that's part of it, being well capitalized enough so you could do it.
Yep. 100% agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So you had a great story that we were talking about offline, right? About Warren Buffett.
The financial crisis.
Yeah, and getting to work through a financial crisis. This is the right timing for that kind of question.
Yeah, because it's about preparedness. Right?
Yeah.
And one of the things his organization is wonderful about is preparedness, because they will study situations even before they become a real opportunity. And so when we were doing restructuring down in Houston, and the bank was stepping up and getting other banks to step up to help these companies that were in a liquidity crisis because of Enron's defaulting on all their swaps. A lot of these companies were then caught cash shortfalls and trying to meet obligations on the other side. And if one party has failed and they're still having to meet the obligation, they're short, right? And a lot of this, they had to post cash margin. So the banks were supporting that, but it wasn't nearly enough. And we were stepping up our lines to the extent we could, but it was like they needed a lot more money. And so you think about, well, where do you go if you need $2 billion?
Yeah.
In a short period of time? Well, there's only a few places, and Buffett's organization's one of them. But I'd never worked with his organization before, and I didn't know what they could do. And so when we approached him, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet the man himself, but we were talking to him about a situation. They said, well, we can come up with $2 billion in 48 hours. And it was like, how on earth could you do that? This situation's so complex to describe it and then think about how exactly you're going to invest. And it's going to be a preferred stock, What are we going to do? How is it going to be structured? They had done this work a year, 2 years in advance. They had already studied the companies. They already knew the situation. They needed to be updated a little bit, but they had prepared themselves to move quickly when the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah.
So when we presented the opportunity, I mean, they extracted a pound of flesh. I mean, these companies had to pay through the nose. I mean, these rates were high. The conversion rates were very favorable. But who else do you go to?
Yeah.
But they had the money. They had the cash. And Buffett's sitting on a lot of cash now, as you probably know. And they're going to be investing it. You could bet they're doing things right now to move this money into a market where they see the long-term prospects, because they think long-term. And so this kind of volatility is where you see, where the real people who understand markets, who think long-term, they can make a lot of money. And so you can expect Buffett's organization he's going to make a lot of money from this.
Yeah.
As they're going to invest wisely.
Yes.
And thoughtfully and long-term. And he's not, this kind of market dislocation, they see as opportunities. And,
Absolutely.
And so when Houston was melting down and everybody was running for the hills thinking all these companies were going to go bankrupt, the Buffetts of the world were going, we smell an opportunity. And they put a ton of capital to work during that period and made a fortune for their investors.
Yeah, an investment friend of mine, near the lines of Buffett, but he said to me once, he said, Joel, when everybody's so scared they're running out of the building because it's on fire, when you have the liquidity to walk in and put it out and not be afraid, he said, that's when you change your game.
Oh, yeah.
And I just
It's
blown away because 2009, Buffett goes in and buys a railway, right? And we're all going, what are you buying a railway for? In Montana, we've got 70 miles of cars sitting on rail tracks here. And it's like, who does that? Buffett does it because he sees the downside has nothing to compare to the upside because he's got the cash.
And he can't pick a bottom any better than anyone else can, and he knows it could deteriorate further, right? And no one can tell you this market's not going to deteriorate further. It could.
Yeah.
We can get some new information on this virus. It could become more widespread. It could go down further, right? But the upside opportunity is starting to look very attractive.
Yeah.
And because the fundamentals of the economy are still there. What we had, 2 months ago, still there.
Yeah.
We still have the planes.
Yep.
They may not be flying. We still have the hotels. They may not be full, but we still have the infrastructure, and this will come back.
Yeah.
And so, and we still have the talent and the people, right? So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think you got to take the long-term view when you're looking at equity, and banks need to take the long-term view when we're dealing with clients. Because we say, okay, is this business viable or not? Is it having some difficulty because of a certain circumstances? But and that's where a partnership, I find that, the relationships I forged in Calgary were good, but it was during good times, right? Some of the relationships I forged in Houston are very different because it was like, you helped save the company. I mean, that's a different relationship. And it's like, wow, you were stood by us when no one else would. I'll tell you one more story, and that is with British Petroleum, which was my client. So I said I had a chance to handle the international energy business. And so they had the Deepwater Horizon disaster. And that was terrible, and people died. And the oil spill, how much damage it was going to do to BP, no one really knew. I mean, it was in the billions, but how many? And the cleanup was going to be so expensive, and they were being sued by just about everyone. So, the question was, well, what should the bank do? Because we were BP's main bank globally, and so should we cut our lines? Should we start protecting ourselves? Should we reduce the daylight overdrafts and all that? And so we get on a conference call with me and my colleagues in London and some of the senior managers of the bank. What should we do? And I said, well, in my view, we need to step up to the plate. We need to immediately lend them at least $2 billion more to stave off a liquidity crisis because their commercial paper was starting not to trade. They were going to just run out of cash. And I said, we needed to step up and provide it. And my colleague in London, who I obviously had talked to before this, agreed and said, well, Clinton's right. Although the phone was silent for a while there. So when I said, what should we do? I said, well, we should, because this is all happening, right? And I didn't know the extent of it. I mean, you have this rig on fire, it's sunk, the oil spill is terrible, and then, we're being asked a lot of questions like, how much is it going to cost them? Well, I don't know, right? At that point. And I said, well, we should step up immediately. By about $2 billion at least. And my colleague in London agreed, and there was some silence on the phone. And they said, you guys serious? This is where the rubber hits the road, right? This is when you know what your banking relationship is, because they were faced with not having cash. I mean, if you miss a payroll, you're bankrupt. I mean, they had expenses and all this stuff. So we stepped up. We did it. And so that was a great call, because I called Brian Smith, who's the BP CFO for the Americas. And he says, how'd it go? And I said, well, we're going to give you another $2 billion. And it's just like such a relief for him, right? I mean, it's like, and he didn't forget that. So when it came down to the trust, so you had all this, we stepped up, we supported him, and then other banks stepped up too, because they saw we stepped up, and so BP's liquidity crisis was averted. And then they had to set up this $20 billion trust, which of course, I'd never handled a trust that big. $20 billion, every big bank in the country wanted that trust. I mean, that is huge, right? And so I mentioned that I didn't win over everybody at Citibank. Well, one of the persons I didn't win over that still hated my guts, she had left the bank because she hated me, and went to JP Morgan. And she was the person I was competing with for this trust. And JP Morgan did all of BP's trust business before then. We had handled their global cash management, and JP Morgan had handled all their trust business globally. And so they had the kind of the in line on it, but it was like, we had stepped up for BP. But it wasn't just going to be BP's decision. It was going to involve Feinberg, who was going to manage the trust, and also this whole thing was politicized too. I mean, Congress was saying, oh, it should go to some of the banks on the coast and all this, and not one of the mega banks because we're the bad guys and all this. But a small bank on the coast can't win it. So we were strategizing about how do we beat this, because JP Morgan was going to be stiff competition for this, and they had their trust business before. It was easier for BP to do it, and JP Morgan was lobbying Congress. I mean, and they had a better relationship with Congress than we did. And so how do we win this thing? And so even though I think I had a better relationship with BP than JP Morgan did. But we decided to partner. We were just brainstorming, and one of the people in the group said, well, they can't handle the trust, but they could cash checks. Maybe we could partner with some of the community banks on the coast and make them part of the bid. So we had some colleagues call Fifth Third and some of the other banks that have branch offices on the Louisiana coast and Alabama and just along there, Florida, and they were asked whether they'd be interested in partnering with us. It was like, hell yes, we'd partner with you on this thing, and so we cut a deal with them, and so our proposal included a lot of these small community banks. And some of this, I'd worked with some of the small community banks in Houston, so I used those connections too to say, well, So we got this, we had this awesome proposal. It really was a team effort, in pulling this thing together, and we won it. And it was such a sweet victory. I mean, $20 billion. And I was sorry that BP, so many people died and so many people lost money. But for us to handle that trust was so awesome. And plus to beat that person that hated my guts, it was sweet, because I knew it would really stick in her craw,
Well, and that was such a big deal to help out the locals.
Right, it helped out the local banks.
And the locals. Right, I mean, that trust helped pay some of the locals who had lost their business.
Right.
Which a friend of mine had that happen down in Florida.
Really?
Yeah. So I from firsthand experience, that was a big deal for a great friend of mine who was a fishing guide down there and had basically been closed up for 6 months. So yeah, so that's a great story on collaborating, bringing other people involved so that you can get the job done for the client. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so we were pulling together. I mean, I got most of what I wanted, but there was some things that I thought were crazy, like cashing checks. So we were going to cash some checks, but I thought maybe 2,000 or 3,000 would be enough, and the rest they should deposit. And Feinberg and his team was going, no, they need more walking around money, and it should be like $20,000. I go, well, who goes into a bank and walks out with $20,000 in cash? But apparently, some people down there like they had that kind of walking around money. I think it's a risk, keep it in the bank. But yeah, so we agreed to that, and I was worried that, oh my, we're going to have people mugging, or there's going to be disaster. But we didn't.
Wow.
But we had people cash checks for that much, and people received more than that sometimes, but they would have to deposit the bigger balance.
Yeah.
But yeah, they could come out with $20,000 in cash. It's like, okay.
Wow.
But I was worried. I was worried about the downside, that we're going to have now a PR disaster with people getting mugged, but it didn't happen. So it was good. Didn't, and people got paid, and in the end, I think it cost BP over $40 billion, all told. But they made restitution, and they're a fine company, and we got them through the liquidity crisis. And they're and they're a good company that's made some mistakes, and they would recognize that. But overall, the people at BP are good people. CFO was a good person, and people make mistakes, and in this case, people lost lives because of those mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's tragedy, right? But it doesn't mean the whole company deserves to be gone. And it can still do a lot of good things around the world, and they are.
Absolutely. Clint, thank you so much.
This
was a fantastic interview. Wow. I mean, there was a lot of content there. Some great things about setting your downside risk, looking at the upside, not trying to time the market, right? Collaborating with people, changing negative mindsets, how you can do that with little victories. Just some great content today. I really want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for drawing it out of me.
Well, everybody, if you want to catch our interviews, you can catch them on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook. On YouTube, you can find us under Silverman Law Office, the Montana Business Vlog. You can catch us on any of the podcasts, Apple, Google, Stitch. The ones I don't even know that Brad behind the camera, our madman from SocialFlixx, who is a sponsor of this program, Silverman Law Office, RC3 Consulting. We just want to thank you all for watching this.